All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are digging into something huge, a sudden and massive shift in how packages get into the US. And believe me, it affects pretty much anyone who buys things online. You know that feeling, right? You order something from another country, maybe some cool gadget or a piece of clothing, and it just shows up at your door. No surprise tax bill, no extra fees to pay. For years, that seamless experience is something most of us have completely taken for granted. Well, guess what? The long-standing rule that made all of that possible, that smooth, duty-free ride for most commercial shipments, it has effectively vanished. And this isn't some tiny little policy change. This is a big deal, a real fundamental break in how the whole system works. To really get it, we need to look at how things used to be. So, to really understand the shockwaves this change is sending out, we first have to rewind and look at the system that was in place for years. You can think of it as the $800 free pass for imports. Okay, so the secret sauce here was a piece of U.S. law called Section 321, or what everyone calls the de minimis exemption. The logic behind it was actually pretty smart. For low-value shipments, the cost and the pure hassle for the government to figure out and collect duties just wasn't worth the tiny amount of money it would bring in. And since 2016, that magic number has been $800. $800. Any qualifying commercial shipment that was valued at $800 or less could sail right into the U.S. completely free of duties and taxes. This was literally the engine of modern global e-commerce. But, and this is a big but, it wasn't a total free-for-all. There was a very important catch. See, you couldn't just cheat the system. To stop companies from, say, splitting a huge order into tons of little boxes, customs enforced what's known as the one-person, one-day rule. The official term is concrescence, which is just a fancy word for adding everything up. So, for example, say 4 packages arrive for you on the same day, each one worth $200. You add them up, that's $800 on the dot. You're good. But if a 5th package showed up that same day, pushing you over that $800 limit, suddenly none of those shipments were duty-free anymore. This rule was the key to keeping the whole system honest. So if this system was so established and had been working for years, what on earth happened? Well, a rapid-fire series of executive actions came down and just brewed the whole thing up. And you can see on this timeline just how fast it all went down. This wasn't one single event. It started in February 2025 with orders targeting shipments from Canada and Mexico, all in the name of border security. Then, boom, April hits and the focus swivels to China, with the stated reason being the flow of illicit drugs. Later that same month, another order pops up, this time talking about trade deficits, which really set the stage for a global change. And then came the final nail in the coffin, July 30th, 2025. A final order declared that customs systems were ready, and just like that, ended the de minimis exemption for all countries. So what was the official story here? According to the White House, these actions were all taken to address a few key things: national emergencies tied to illicit drugs, enhancing border security, and stopping what they called deceptive shipping practices, trying to fix large and persistent trade deficits, and making sure tariffs weren't being weakened by a flood of low-value shipments. And just like that, it was over. The era of the $800 duty-free pass for commercial shipments, gone. And the difference between then and now is, well, it's night and day. Before, shipments under $800 flew through with a super simple clearance process. Now, that threshold is gone. Every single commercial shipment, I don't care if it's $5 or $500, is now subject to duties, and it has to go through a formal customs entry. That means filing a ton of detailed information into the government's main trade processing system, called ACE. But you know what really sent the entire logistics world into a panic? The speed. The final order was issued on July 30th, with the change taking effect on August 29th, 2025. That's just 30 days. 1 month for an entire global industry to basically tear up its playbook and start over from scratch. Okay, so what does this actually mean on the ground? For all those businesses, the big ones and the small ones that built their entire operations around that old system. I think this quote from Dan Kelly at the Canadian Federation of Independent Business just says it all. It is the uncertainty that is choking small businesses. He gave this example of a small Canadian business that sells vintage trading cards to U.S. customers online, a simple, profitable business model. And then, literally overnight, their whole world was thrown into chaos. It's that kind of uncertainty that absolutely hammers small and medium-sized companies. This creates a huge new operational burden. For every single package, a shipper now has to go through a formal process. First, they have to classify the item with a specific HTS code, which is a universal number that decides the duty rate. Then they have to file a formal entry in that ACE system we mentioned. Only then can they finally calculate and pay the taxes. For a company shipping thousands of small items a day, this is a monumental, staggering increase in labor and complexity.
And a huge strategic fallout from this is the death of a very popular business model. For years, companies would warehouse inventory in Canada or Mexico and then ship low-value orders directly to U.S. consumers, all to take advantage of that $800 exemption. With that exemption gone, the entire financial reason for doing that has been completely wiped out. That business model is now obsolete.
So all of this brings us to the big million-dollar question. What happens now? Where do we possibly go from here? Let's be crystal clear. This is not a minor policy shift. A foundational pillar that supported the explosion of global, low-value e-commerce into the world's largest consumer market has just been pulled out from under it. The effects of this are going to ripple through supply chains for years to come. What this all means is that we've shifted from a system that favored simplicity and speed for small packages to a new reality of universal taxation and formal clearance. And that leaves us with a huge question for every single business and consumer who's part of the global marketplace. With this duty-free era for commercial shipping now officially over, will global e-commerce ever be the same? Thanks for watching The Explainer.